Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Water in Communications. Today, we are going to have a completely different session to the previous ones, where you are actually going to do quite a lot of work. It's going to be an interactive session. For all of you who've been with us since 2021, I think that was the first time when you joined us, Anders. You know Anders as a presentation coach and a science communicator and presentation coach. And today we are going to get a masterclass in science communication and sharpen your brains, sharpen your pens, because Anders, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. And thank you very much for inviting me again to give you tips and tricks on how to improve your research communications. Now, I will be talking about to everyone as if you were researchers, but these tools and tricks I will talk about today can be applied to other subjects as well, other projects that you might be conducting or have been conducting. So we have 90 minutes together, and this will be all about crafting your message. And I will try to give you as much value as possible this time. So this session is divided into two parts. The first part, I will give you tools and tips on how to craft a short presentation, a pitch, if you'd like, about your research. And for those of you who have joined us before, many of the concepts will be familiar to you, but I really encourage you to do the exercises again, because I've had people doing my workshop several times, and they say every time you get a new idea, something sparks differently, and you do the exercises differently each time. Now, the second part, I will ask you to actually put together a short pitch about your research, about using the tools I have been giving you. And then I will invite some of you to get some live feedback from me. So you will write a short pitch and get live feedback. And so the second part will be like a masterclass where you learn how you can apply these tools for your particular subject and for your particular personality. Now, this is not the coaching is not to give a sort of a review of your performance. That's not the idea. It's about what I told you before, how to apply these tools into your own subject and presentation, because that is what I get most asked about. Well, how do I actually apply this into my own area? And doing this in front of all others will also get them new ideas on how they can apply these tools. So it will not be just a service to you, it will be a service to the whole group and to the whole community. And I will ask the CV team that none of these sort of coaching session of this session will then be recorded or publicized, just the sort of workshop part. Okay, so are you excited for that? When it's time for the live coaching, I will ask you to write in the chat to volunteer, right? So, so I will give you concrete tips and tools for how to present and communicate your research in an effective and engaging way to the public. You probably already know how to talk to your peers. This is when you go outside of this group. And as I said, I will talk to you all as if you were a researcher, but the concept of the workshop will work for any other area of expertise. Or if you are an experienced communicator, you can regard this as a train the trainer session where you can learn some methodology that you can apply when coaching your own researchers or scientists in your own community. And this will be a very practical session, as Joel mentioned. So I will ask you to take out pen and paper, because I will give you exercise to do in front of your computer. So you will get a lot more value out of the workshop if you follow along with me. So is that all right? Can I give a hand raise from you to see that you're all on board for the workshop here? Let's give a hand raise. I think in Zoom you can, is it possible to just give, like, do like this nowadays?
Yeah, it's under React. You should see like a little heart
Yes,
icon.
it's under
and then-
reactions. You can have the raise hand function.
And then you have like raise hand. Exactly.
Perfect. Great. Great. I can see you're all on board. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for your participation. And what I also would like to say is I will talk a lot during this first session. But if you have any questions during the session, please write them in the chat and we will get back to them when we have a little short Q&A session before you go out into writing the pitch. All right, so let's get started. After this session, you will have a structure for doing a pitch or a presentation. You will have tools for creating that pitch or presentation, and you will have some more ideas for how to develop your pitch and presentation. So let's use that raise hand function again. So how many of you have heard one or several boring presentations in all of your life? In all of your life, how many of you have heard one or perhaps several less engaging presentations? Yes, I can see almost all of you. And now, how many of you have ever in your whole of your life, once or twice perhaps, know that you have made a boring presentation? I can absolutely attest to that. Thank you very much. And thank you for your honesty as well. Thank you. So I've been trying to thinking about this. So what makes a presentation less engaging? In my opinion, I believe it's two main things. So two main things. The first one is that we try to tell everything in sort of chronological order, in the logical order, in the order that we think is the most logical. So problem number one is the structure of the presentation. So soon I will give you a structure for a pitch or a presentation that you can use. The good thing about this structure is that it works for short pitches as well as longer presentations. Now, the second thing is that we often include too much information. I will show you a mistake that many people make. So if you have spotlighted my video, you will see my slides here. So you've probably seen this kind of presentation. If we say that this circle represents everything that you know about the subject, and this little square represents the amount of time a person has been given to talk about that subject, many people try to do like this. They try to cram everything they know into this little square. You've probably seen these kinds of presentation where the presenter thinks like, oh, I have 10 minutes. I just take my 2-hour presentations and I talk a bit faster. We've all seen that, right? And this is a recipe for disaster. For you taking too much information, the audience gets confused. They don't know what's important. You often speak too fast. You don't keep time. So never do like this. Instead, you have to choose. You have to choose the most important and effective parts about your research and the project to tell the audience about. Now, this, of course, means that the audience won't know everything about your research, but that should never be your goal, because that is impossible. You are the expert in the room. You can't expect that an audience knows as much about your research as you do. So your aim should instead be, for every presentation that you make, that the audience should want to ask you questions. Your job is to give an as inspiring and engaging presentation so that something sparks in their mind and they want to ask you questions afterwards. So you can think about it like this. A pitch is the start of a conversation, and you can even write that down. A pitch is the start of a conversation. Because oftentimes we believe that we have to include all information in the presentation so that there are no questions afterwards, so that the audience won't sit there and wonder about anything. But actually, it's the opposite. When do you get most interested in something? It's actually when you don't know everything, when you leave some unanswered questions, because then the audience will start to think, oh, wow, how will they achieve that? How did they do that? What will happen now? So if we want to ignite the other person's interest so that he or she starts asking questions and start thinking about your project. So what is the most interesting thing that you can say about your research that will spark a conversation? And that is something you should always keep in mind when doing a presentation. So let's get down to business. The way this will work is I will ask you a set of questions. And for each question, I will give you 1 minute to answer that question. But please don't try to think of the perfect answer to each question, because there are no perfect answers. Instead, I ask you to write down as many answers as possible during this minute. As many answers as possible. Just take the first thing that comes to your mind, because there are not just one way of answering these questions. There are many ways. And if we do this, we will create small building blocks for building your pitch later on. So much of the work will be done during these brainstorming sessions. And this is how I believe a presentation should be structured. Many people sit down in front of an empty PowerPoint making bullet points. But I think that if you sit down with pen and paper first and think about what is it actually that you want to convey and say, and then think about how can slides or props or anything else enhance this message, this will become a better presentation. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is to decide on a big idea. And what is that? Well, that is the main message that you want to convey with your presentation. And this is where many people go wrong. They haven't decided on a big idea. They haven't decided on a core message, because they think that we should just present as much information as possible, and then the audience can decide what's important. And as I said before, that's impossible. So you have to do the work before that. So you have to choose. What is it, the big idea that you want to convey? If I put it like this, what's the one thing I want the audience to remember about my research or about my project? If there was only one thing you would want them to remember about that after your presentation, what would that be? And that should be stated as a short, active sentence. So I will show you an example of this. One of Sweden's most prominent research communicator was Hans Rosling. Some of you may probably have heard of him. I will show you an excerpt from his first TED Talk. This is many years ago, but it serves as an example of that sort of big idea that you want to convey. And this was the talk that sort of made him famous. So I will show you a short excerpt of that, and then we'll think about what his big idea was.
In 1962, there was really a group of countries here that was industrialized countries, and they had small families and long lives. And these were the developing countries. They had large families and they had relatively short lives. Now, what has happened since 1962? We want to see the change. Are the students right? It's still two types of countries? Or have these developing countries got smaller families and they live here? Or have they got longer lives and live up there? Let's see, we stop the world. And this is all UN statistic that has been available. Here we go. Can you see there? It's China. They're moving against better health. They're improving there. All the green Latin American countries, they are moving towards smaller families. The yellow ones here are the Arabic countries, and they get larger families, but longer lives, but not larger families. The Africans are the green down here. They still remain here. This is India. Indonesia is moving on pretty fast. And in the 80s here, you have Bangladesh still among the African countries there. But now Bangladesh, it's a miracle that happens in the 80s. The imams start to promote family planning, and they move up into that corner. And in 90s, we have the terrible HIV epidemic that takes down the life expectancy of the African countries, and all the rest of the world moves up into the corner where we have long lives and small family, and we have a completely new world.
All right, so what was Hans Rosling's main message here, his big idea? Well, it wasn't about, look what cool graphs I made, or look how funny I am that I can speak like a sports commentator to comment on these graphs. No, at this time, he wanted to convey the big idea that the world is better. The world is getting better. It's actually better than we thought it was then. He wanted to change the concept of, developed countries and non-developed countries. to see that we are more alike than we believe. So the world is getting better was his sort of big idea for his presentations. And in other presentations he made, he didn't use these graphs at all. He used like cardboard boxes or toilet rolls. I remember one time I worked with him at a conference in Telberg, and I was a stage manager, and said, I need 20 cardboard boxes in an hour. That was what he wanted to convey then with his presentation. But the big idea, the main message always stayed the same, no matter what means or tools he used to convey that message. Now, it sounds perhaps a bit big to have a big idea like this, the world is getting better, but everyone can find sort of a core message about what you want the audience to learn. And if you have trouble finding this, try to think of it, what is the new thing I can tell the audience about? What is the new thing I can tell them about? We will love learning new things. So maybe the audience knows something about this, maybe they know something about this, but this is where I can add to that conversation, and so that they learn something that they then can go home and tell their friends and family about. So you will get 1 minute to think about what's the one thing I want the audience to remember about my research, or what's the new thing I want the audience to learn. 1 minute, write down as many answers as possible, starting now. And that's 1 minute. Well, you can have several big ideas in a longer presentation, and you can have different big ideas depending on who you are talking to. I mean, the big idea might be different if we're talking to policymakers, or if your audience is a class of 10-year-olds. But for this one pitch, I would suggest that you choose one of the big ideas that you have just written down. Okay, so remember when I said that I will give you one of the problems with boring presentations is the structure. Well, now I'm going to give you a suggestion for a structure that you can start to experiment with. And it looks like this. First, you start with explaining the problem, the larger problem that your research will contribute to solve. Then you talk about the solution and what results you expect to get. Then you talk about who benefits from these results, and then you finish off with an action to the audience. And we will go through these things separately, but write this structure down for now so you have it in front of you, and then you can just add pieces to it while we work our way through it, right? So we will start with the problem, because what is the most effective way of engaging an audience? How do you make the audience listen to you immediately? Well, it's to tell them a story. There's something about stories that immediately catches our attention. We all sit there and wonder, like, how is this going to end? So I do workshop for storytelling for scientists, where we go through a structure for how to create a story about your research. But I would say the most important part of that structure is the problem. Because every good story contains a problem that must be solved, right? So what is the problem that your project wants to solve? I'm not talking about the research question itself. With problem, I mean, what is the larger problem that your project contributes to solve? Some people will say that this is the background, but by phrasing this as a problem, like the problem is that there is no cure for this disease yet. We don't know actually what affects this water. So phrasing it as a problem, you'll catch the audience attention more effectively, because as soon we learn that there's a problem to be solved, we immediately get interested. And when describing that problem, I will give you some examples as well. Don't try to be too general. Instead, be very specific, because it's details that paints the picture in the audience's mind. So use data, analogies, use examples to paint that picture of the problem in the audience's minds. And also tell us what's at stake here. What happens if we don't manage to solve the problem? If we don't find the cure to this disease, we might lose 40,000 people a year. Or the opposite, what happens if we manage to solve the problem? Well, if we could solve this water issue, we could help 40,000 people each year, right? So write down as many answers as possible for the question, what problem will my research help to solve? Starting now. Okay, that's 1 minute. And I would like to remind you that you write down the answers to these questions. You write down in front of you on your pen, with your pen and paper. So you don't have to write them in the chat. You just write them down in front of you and write down as many answers as possible for each question. Okay, so the next part is the solution. And those are actually, that part contains of two subparts, you might say. The first part is, what is my approach to solving the problem? So first you have set the stage of the large problem, then you tell us where your research comes into the picture. So if we are talking about, for example, a disease, this is where you tell us, so I study a certain protein that might play a part in this kind of disease. So where does your research come into the picture? What is it that you do? Write down as many answers as possible for 1 minute, starting now. Hey, that's 1 minute. Good work, everyone. Good work. Now, a subset of the solution part is to tell the audience about the results of your research. So you can write this down. People buy results. People buy results. They don't buy how you did something. They buy the results of your work. So think of a shampoo commercial, you know, quite banal, but a shampoo commercial, they don't show you the factory where the shampoo is made and all the chemicals that go into the shampoo, right? No, they show you the result. They show you what luscious and beautiful hair you will get when you use that shampoo. Most researchers spend the greater part of their presentations on the how part. But I'm sorry, that is the least interesting part of for an audience to listen to. This is where it gets easy to get stuck on detail that is not relevant for your big idea. So when I say results, I mean, the how part is a good thing for the audience to ask you about afterwards. Well, how are you going to do this? So when I say results, results can be of different kinds, you know, quantitative, qualitative, or they might also include some of what effects your project will achieve. So you might think of it this way. Sometimes results can also be outcomes. And think of it more as outcome. Think of it this way. What will be in the world when you are finished with your project that wasn't there before? Is it something tangible? Is it a project? Is it a method? Or is it something new knowledge about this particular subject? Or we learn more about the connection between this and this? What is in the world that wasn't there before? Because before we learn how you did something in your project, we want to know what it leads to. And if you don't have any results yet, you might be early in your project or you might be early in your research. Think about what would be in a perfect world where everything goes exactly as planned. What would be the perfect kinds of results that you would get? So write down as many suggestions as possible for this during 1 minute, starting now. That's 1 minute. Great work, everyone. Now, the next step is to talk about the benefit of your research. So who or what benefits from the outcomes of your research? Because all research impacts something or someone, and we want to know who or what that is. And again, try to be as specific as possible. For often when I ask researchers this question, I ask them, so who will your research impact? Well, it will impact everyone. It's important for the whole world. Okay, right? But if you're being more specific, well, then probably the end users. And who are they? Well, they can be managers. And what kind of managers? I mean, it's almost down to the level of my research benefits middle managers on water engineering companies in the southern part of Sweden, almost down to that level of specificity. Why? Well, partly this helps the audience to understand more about who or what your research benefits, or it helps you as a researcher as well. I mean, when you are ready with your results and you want to get them out into the world, you know exactly who you're going to contact, right? So this will benefit you and the audience as well. So write down as many suggestions as possible and be very specific about the question, who or what benefits from my results? 1 minute starting now. And that's 1 minute. Great work, everyone. We are getting great results here, right? Okay, so the last part is the action part. Remember when I said, and you wrote it down as well, that a pitch is the start of a conversation? Well, this is the time where you start that conversation, because most presentations end passively. You know, there is a big thank you behind the slide behind the speaker, and they say, I think that's all for me, and they go off stage. But how can you end your presentation or pitch more actively? What do you want the listener to do when they have heard your pitch or presentation? What action do you want them to make? It can be millions of things that you want them to do. A simple thing is just to say where they can learn more about your project, or how they can get in contact with you on social media or LinkedIn or something like that. Or perhaps you want them to donate to a cause, or sign a petition, or take part in a research project. Maybe you have a challenge right now that you would like to have some input on. I mean, if you're telling the pitch to a person in the coffee line at a conference, maybe you can finish with a question to get the conversation going between you and the other person. So there are millions of things that you can do, but the important thing is not just to end in a passive way. So think about, what action do you want the listener to make? What do I want the listener to do now? Write down as many suggestions as possible for 1 minute, starting now. Perfect. Good work, everyone. So now you have created lots of building blocks for your pitch, because you have created lots of answers for each questions. Now, these building blocks you can then expand to create one or several different pitches. You can just take your building blocks, put it into the structure, and there you have your first draft of your pitch. But I will give you 3 things to think about when putting the pitch together, because what will happen soon is that I will give you 10 minutes to put together your answers into the structure and create a first draft of your pitch. And then I will invite some of you to test your draft and get some live feedback from me. And so I will give you some tips along the way. The first one is write a script. Perhaps we are not used to writing scripts when we do pitches or presentations, because we often, as I said, sit down in front of an empty PowerPoint and try to build it from the slides. But if for a short pitch like this, for a 60-second, 1-minute pitch, I would suggest that you write a script. And you have done half of it ready. You have written these answers, right? But I would encourage you, when you do regular presentations, to write a script first, actually. Because it's the process of writing the script to decide what to include in the presentation and what not to include, that is a very, very important process. And when you write a script, it's very important also to write as you talk, because we talk and we write very differently. We tend to write in long sentences using more complicated words, for example, but we speak in short sentences using less complicated language. And you can immediately hear when someone has sort of written a presentation and reads the script out loud, because you can immediately hear that it's more of a written language rather than a spoken one. And I often get people asking me, well, I have a hard time remembering my script. Well, that's a sure way of knowing that you have done a script that is more in a written language where every word is important. But because if you write a script that's more in a talkative manner, you know exactly where you are going, but the words are not that important to get there. And nowadays there are, as we see here, we have Spanish translation in real time, and there are a lot of transcribing tools that you can use. So, for example, you can start with a couple of bullet points that you want to talk about, and then you can record yourself and you can let that service transcribe what you have said, and then you have a script and you can see the way you talk. So write as you talk, very important. And then also, this is a more general tip, because I will ask you to write a 1-minute pitch. But as in the example I showed you before, where the presenter had got a certain amount of time, we expect you to keep that time. That's perhaps the second best thing that you can do to look more professional than like 98% of all other speakers. Keep time. Because it shows respect to the audience. It shows that you have done the work to deliver as much value as possible, even if you just have got 5 minutes to talk. That's also one thing to remember. Never complain about the time you have been given to talk. That's also showing that you haven't done the work for the audience. And it also looks most professional. Instead of you talking too fast and the moderator coming up on stage and say, I think we must finish now, and say, I only have four slides left, I just want to finish here. Then if you say, thank you, that's all for me, I think we have 5 minutes now for questions. That looks more professional, right? So practice your presentations with a timer. That's a very useful tip. Now, to do a good pitch or to do a good presentation, I think the most important thing is to test it as much and as often as you can, because no good pitch or presentation is created in a vacuum. I mean, I did stand-up for 7 years, and the way that worked is that I sat home, wrote a couple of jokes that I thought were funny, and then I went out to a club and tested them, and I realized they weren't as funny as I thought they were. So I recorded my performances, I went back home, listened, and then I could hear, yes, the setup here is too long. This need a stronger punchline. I need to change this word to a more funnier word. And this is the same process with creating a good pitch or presentation, because every time you do it, you get feedback on what works and what doesn't, and then you rewrite it, and then it gets better each time. So becoming a better speaker or better presenter is a process where you should see every opportunity you get to speak and present as an opportunity to progress on your journey to becoming a great speaker. So every time I would encourage you to try something new. Challenge yourself and try to do something new, because then you will get a lot of data on what works and what doesn't. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be like, I just try to change the order of these 2 slides. I will try now to do the beginning with energy. Because if you set small goals for yourself and you can accomplish them, you can feel very, very proud of yourself, no matter how the rest of the presentation went, because you did what you set out to do, right? Okay, and when you ask someone for feedback on your talk, don't just say, what did you think? Because if it's a friend or a colleague, they will probably say, yeah, it was good. And that doesn't give you very much information, does it? But instead, if you ask them to retell what you just have said, within their own words, of course, you will get a lot more information about what they understood, what they took away from your talk. Was that the same as you thought they would take away? Where did they struggle? Was there words or concept that you didn't that they didn't understand? And then you have your script, so you can go back and directly, you know exactly where you have to make changes. So ask them to retell what you just have said. I think that's the most powerful way of getting feedback. Okay, so I will soon let you out, and you have 10 minutes to do your first draft of your pitch. And remember, it doesn't have to be good. It's not supposed to be good. The important thing is to start somewhere and then refine it, as I said. And then I will invite some of you to do your pitch in front of the group, and you will get feedback from me. And the way, as I said in the beginning, it's not to review your performance or pitch. That's not the thing. It's to see how these concepts can be applied to your subject and to your personality as well. So I will give you instructions for how that coaching sessions will work later on. But now I'm happy to take any questions that you might have before I let you out to perfect your script, to do your first draft of your pitch. So any questions that you might have, raise hands, or you can write them in the chat. Let's see. Any questions, comments, or objections? I love objections as well.
Here we go. We have a question from Marco. Does this structure work for when I want to write a research proposal?
It might work, actually. I think it's very useful for making the summary of your research proposal, because that is the first part that, you know, a committee, a panel reads. They want to first get a sense of what is this project about. You know, I mean, I coach researchers doing these prestigious ERC grants. You can get 2 million euros for a research project. And then there they are asked to do a short presentation for 2 to 5 minutes, depends on panel, and then followed by an interview. And there, these concepts are very valuable. And they have been proven to work in that setting as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. We have one more question from Robert. Can you explain more the difference between the approach and the how, please?
Yes, absolutely. Good question. The how part, I mean, that's where you tell us all about the details of what machines you're going to use, what results you have got, what kind of graphs you have got from your machines, how exactly you are going to go about with your research, all those details that are not really interesting for the audience. But your approach to the solution is to say, well, I study this thing. And sometimes you have to say, well, I study a protein that may play a part in this disease. And we have made some really interesting discoveries. So the approach to your solution is just tell us what is it you do. And the how part is when you go into details about how you're going to do it.
Right. And thank you. And we have Marissa. What do you say? Using data against stories, what is the better, or how to combine them?
Well, I would say if you look at any TED Talk that you see, they follow the same structure. It's stories, then data. So that's how you can combine them. And stories are useful for being very specific. I mean, I took the example of a disease, for example. I can tell a story about Lisa. This is a day in her life. This is how it looks. These are the symptoms she experiences. And this is the reality for 40,000 people in the world right now suffering from this kinds of disease. So being specific first with telling a story and then give us the larger picture with data or examples. That's a very powerful thing to do.
All right, thank you. I will call on Cecile to read out Rosa's Spanish question because my Spanish is really not up to the task. Cecile, are you there?
Yes, I am. The question is, ¿qué sugiere hacer cuando el tema es
So what
demasiado
do you suggest to do
aburrido para
when the
captar
topic
al
is
público?
too boring in order
¿Cómo
to
podemos
get
mantener
the audience
activo al
attention?
público
How
cuando
can we
son
keep
varios
the audience
expositores y el
active
último en
whenever
pasar
we
es
have
tú?
several speakers and you're the last one to go on stage or to talk?
Yes. So how can we engage the audience when we are sort of the last speaker in the afternoon, right? And I think the key to doing engaging presentation is variation. If you are just showing slide on slides and you just talk the same way, that's a presentation with no variations. But if you start by asking the audience a question, it can be anything. I mean, if you're after a coffee break, say, did you enjoy your coffee? Yes. So you engaged in a way, and then you can choose showing slides, parts of your presentation, showing no slides. You can ask them a question again. You can tell them a story. So try to think of how to vary your presentation as much as possible. Playing a small video clip is also a variation. Making a poll in the audience, raise hands if you have made this, raise hands if you've done this. I mean, there are all these kinds of way of getting variation into the presentation, and that creates engagement.
Thank you. Heidi has a question as well. In addressing the quote problem, unquote, in the narrative, is there a place to address objections? I understand this to be a powerful strategy to embed within the pitch because it shapes a positive relationship with those who might resist and get stuck there. How do you work with common objections that could stop the work or shift the tone in the room? Thanks. This is so much fun.
Oh, thank you for that. And thank you for the question. Very good question. Yes, how to deal with common objections. Well, you can incorporate, if you know what those objections are, you can actually incorporate them in your story, in your presentation. I would suggest that you incorporate them in the first part, in the problem part. And I think this is more applicable to longer presentations. And you have to be really careful also about your wording. Take Hans Rosling as an example. I talked to his son about how they created his presentations, and they worked on them for months. And for example, when they had talked about overpopulation, for example, they had a list of words that they were not allowed to use in the presentation, because they knew that if we used these words, that would send the audience's mind in sort of the wrong direction. So be very careful about the wording you use, and try to address the objections in, sort of a veiled form, like a stories or certain examples like that. So it takes a bit of work, but it's very doable.
Right. And so he says, what if you don't know whether there will be a question opportunity? Should that change what you include in the presentation, since you might not get to have a conversation afterwards?
Yeah, very good question. Thank you. I think it's a mindset. If you have the mindset of the audience should want to ask you questions afterwards, that will change the way you will do your presentation. If you always think that you should inspire and engage and encourage questions, then they might not actually be able to ask you questions at that particular moment in time, but they might be more inclined to come up to you during lunchtime or coffee break to ask you about, you said that thing there, what do you think, blah, blah, blah. So think about it. It's not just for creating questions at that particular time. It's that you inspire and engage interest for after you have made your presentation as well.
Right, thank you. And Kasim has a question. Could this structure be effective for project analysis, specifically for reach data analysis in the discovery phase?
Ooh, I think that's a bit complicated question. I haven't tried it to do that. So, but I would suggest experiment and see.
Experiment and try. Yes.
Yes.
And then we have James saying, what if the problem is not really the problem according to the audience? What do you do?
Thank you. Interesting question. I'm not quite sure what you mean there, because if you are doing research, there's always something that you want to find out, right? There's always something, even if you do like basic research, there's always something that you want to know, something that you want to solve. And if you find that problem engaging and interesting, the audience will also feel engaged and interested about that particular problem. Because as soon as you talk from something that you are engaged in, the audience will feel engaged too. You probably heard of this concept of mirroring. The way you feel on stage, you project it on the audience. So if you think the problem is necessary and something that you are engaged in, they will believe you. Okay,
Right. Thank you. I think that's it.
Thank you for all the questions. Now we will get to work. So I will give you 10 minutes time to write down the first draft of your pitch. And as I said, it doesn't have to be good. We're looking for progress, not perfection here, right? So 10 minutes, I will set the timer. I will be here during that time. So if you have any questions or want some encouragement or tips, you are allowed to do so. And then I will invite you to get some live feedback on your pitches from me. And we will have more instructions on how that is going to work later on. But now I will give you 10 minutes starting now. Okay, that's 10 minutes. So now I will invite you to get some live feedback from me, those who want to. And we have a couple of rules. So the ones who are choosing to do the live feedback, they are the brave ones, right? And we want to give them all the support we can. So in the reactions, I suggest you keep an eye on the applause hand as well, right? And we have a few rules as well. I am the only one giving feedback. So don't write in the chat or something else about giving each other feedback. I am the only one giving feedback. You can ask questions in the chat if you want to. What about when we do like this? How we do in this kind of situation? That's totally allowed. Questions are fine. Feedback in the chat, no. I am the only one giving feedback. And also, I will say that, as I said to everyone I do these sessions for, that my words are not the law. This is not exactly the rules on how to do it. I give you tips and advice from my perspective, and you take away what you find the most useful, because in the end, it's you that has to own your own material. Right, so I think we'll use the, if you want to volunteer for doing the feedback, you can raise hand in the raise hand functions in the reactions down here, or you can write in the chat. Otherwise, I will just choose someone who will do the feedback. This is fun. This is a little experiment for Gerald and me. We haven't done it this way, right, Gerald?
Hello, hello.
Hello, Marissa.
So do I have 1 minute then? Do I have 1 minute?
Yes, you have 1 minute, and I can time you if you want. You don't have to sort of keep to 1 minute, but I'll time you and see where we are on the scale. If it's much over 1 minute or if it's less than 1 minute, we'll see. Perfect. Are you ready? I think we already now do a round of applause for Marissa in the chat.
Ya,
Great. So you can start whenever you want.
ok, ya va. Lo que estamos tratando es de...
So what we're trying to do is to contribute to improving the inequality situation of women in terms of water access, since that impacts their health care, their education, and their economy. So this is specifically for indigenous women, women who are more vulnerable, for instance, women in refugee camps, women in street situation, but also women overall in the water sector. So what we have seen that works is investing in training, in communication, and empowerment programs for women, as well as the infrastructure that's created with a gender approach, for instance, more damages for women than men, as well as facilities with more privacy and all the inputs they need, for instance, in terms of menstruation, a dignified menstruation when women need water the most. And we also believe that it's important to create awareness in all of those who have the possibility of make decisions. And with this, we are expecting to have fewer diseases in women, for them to have better education, and for them to be able to make better decisions that will improve not only their lives, but also of their entire families and very likely of all of their communities. And well, for all of this, we would like to invite you all, first of all, to get informed a little bit more, for you to identify experts and possible allies so that we can have further discussions on this topic, and for us to be able to create programs and initiatives with gender approach, and of course allocating resources for them. So that would be my invitation for today.
Okay, thank you very much, Marissa. Okay, so how long did you think that was? Yes, a round of applause in the chat for Marissa. So how long did you speak for, you think?
I think like 2 minutes, probably. I don't know.
Yes, 2 minutes, 10 seconds. Great. Okay, so let's start by asking you, could you give us an example of the women you are trying to help? Put us into that situation in a refugee camp. Describe the situation.
Yes, just allow me to use an example that, I mean, I have really close to my heart right now. So there's a specific woman, Rosana, in the Chiapas forest, tropical forest, and she's telling us that in this season of droughts, the well that is located in her community, out of that well, they can only get 20 liters of water a day. And well, we all know that according to the organizations of the WHO, the appropriate thing for you is to have at least 100 liters. And also, herself and her kids need to walk a very long distance in order to be able to get water from the well. So she doesn't have enough water throughout the day. And one of the things she's expressing is her concern, not only because her kids do not have water, but her kids and the kids of all the women in that community are not being able to go to school because the school is shut down. So this is an example of how educational opportunities are limited from all the kids in the community. And of course, that this creates inequality in life, per se.
And what do you want to do to help them?
I wish, I mean, there are initiatives, but I do believe that we need to look for those who are already developing initiatives in the field, those people who are already working with people like them, so we can either escalate or replicate those same initiatives. Of course, adapting them to the specific needs from each community, for instance.
And what would you need to do that?
Time and resources. Resources in order to identify more organizations and being able to hold meetings with those organizations. Like on the one hand, putting together the organizations, and on the other one, possible donors and local authorities who have the obligations so as to being able to have a supportive environment between the beneficiary, the potential donor, and organizations who already have capabilities created with regards to this type of initiatives.
Great, Marissa, great. We could have more time to go into more details, but what I took away now from when I asked you the questions is that I saw that you were more personally engaged in the answers you gave me now. You said, let me take an example that's near to my heart. And that's exactly how you should start this kind of presentation. So share with us an example of how a particular person is doing, and then you can translate it into this is the reality for this amount of women today. This is what we want to do to help them, and this is how you can help us to help them. Because I think when I asked you the questions, it was your heart was in it, and I believed you, and it was more clear for me what you want. Yes. So, but I understand the first one was sort of the official version. But even if we have, oh, I got confetti now. Is that when we do this? Okay. Right. But when you took it from your personal engagement in these questions, I felt that you were really engaged, and I want to help your organization as well. So even when we have sort of an organization behind us that we have certain messages that we want to get across, we want to try to find, well, what engages me in this work, because there is a reason that you work on your particular organization, and it's about who you want to help and feel for these organizations. So even if you're talking from an organization's perspective, try to make it personal. So thank you very much, Marissa. A round of applause for you. Great work. Great work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marissa, for being the first one to volunteer. We now have a second. Do we have a question from Rosa? Do you mind typing that question, Rosa?
I think we have Robert Williams was
Yes,
next in line, or we have a question before that.
We can take the questions in the end, I think, and we take
Yes.
Robert. Robert, are you there? Please put on your camera as well, Robert.
Robert, are you still here with us?
Are you perhaps on mute? I'm trying to find Robert. I can see him. Robert, you are mute. Should we do Lindsay? Lindsay also volunteered, and then we come back to
Yeah,
Robert?
sure. Yes. Yes.
Sure.
Hi.
Okay, brilliant. Thank
And we
you
can see
so
you.
much. Great. Thank you, Anders, for the chance to share my thoughts here. So 1 minute, are we ready?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
So climate tech founders often struggle to communicate the importance and value of their work with investors, customers, and partners. What I do is I help bridge the gap between innovation and impact by using my expertise as a climate researcher and a communicator to translate the science behind climate tech innovations. For founders, this means creating a communication strategy that stays true to the essence of their product or service. For investors, this means evaluating potential investments to understand the technology comprehensively, determine impact, and also be aware of any potential negative consequences.
Okay. 40 seconds.
All right, under a minute.
Great, Lindsay. Okay, so tell me more about the problem here that you want to solve.
Right. So I've worked a lot with entrepreneurs in the tech space, and in particular, climate
so you're
technology.
A climate researcher.
I am a former climate researcher. I did my PhD about 7 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
And since then, I've been working in communication with tech startups and investors, and most recently helping to really translate the science and help guide investment decisions into areas with the potential for the most impact.
So you're trying to get tech startups to understand climate issues?
No, I'm trying to work with tech founders that are already working with climate issues and help them more effectively and efficiently communicate what they're doing to help potential investors and customers and users really understand their products.
Okay, so what is the problem that they are experiencing?
With a lot of the founders that I meet, they're researchers themselves. They come from, an engineering background or a science background, and the problem they're trying to address and the solution they're coming up for it are so complex, and they're so in the details of it that they really struggle to communicate, what does this actually do? What's the problem it's solving? And, what value does this bring to the world? So what I do is try to help them, really stay true to what they're doing and feel like they're still getting their point across, but in a way that's simple enough for really anyone to understand and engage with it.
Okay, raise the stakes here.
Mm.
What's the promising solutions that they can offer that gets lost now in translation?
It's anything from new ways to sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to novel production methods and ways to save energy. It's really a wide variety of solutions that may never get off the ground if they can't find the right investors and stakeholders to buy into their approaches.
Okay, start with a what if. What if we could sequester carbon dioxide? Tell me all about the solution. What if?
What if? Well, the world
what if we just state it? What if we could blah 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 blah?
If we could sequester carbon dioxide from our atmosphere, we could avoid some of the most severe impacts of climate change in the future. So really, we're safeguarding our future on this planet.
And you know that the solutions are there, right?
Correct.
So, okay. But what is the thing that doesn't make this a reality right now? Because what if we could have all this future? What if we could have this, and we have the solution? But what is here that is stopping us from having that solution, right?
I think it's a breakdown in communication. It's
no, yes,
yeah.
But I want you to tell it like this.
Tell it like this.
Yes. What if we could, just as you said, what if we could?
If we could facilitate this communication between climate tech founders and investors and solutions, then we are safeguarding a future on planet Earth.
Perfect. Yes. So this is, I think, to get the audience engaged about what you are doing, you have to sort of paint the picture of what is possible.
Okay.
What if we could do this? What if we could do this? What if we could do this? Then our future would look like this.
Okay.
And you know what? We already have the solutions.
Yes.
We have this company working in that blah, blah, blah. We have that company working with that. We have that company working with that. But the problem is we don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I want to help them to get their ideas out into the world to help them, right?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So, yeah, so paint the picture for us first. What's it possible? Because first you emphasize that image with details so we can really see it in front of us. And then you say that we already have these solutions, because that is perhaps a new thing that we didn't know before, that we didn't know that there are. I mean, I coach researchers, like many researchers a day. There are a lot of solutions to problems that I didn't know was even there, that people were working on them. But then you say, here's the problem.
That's why I left academia, because I saw this huge disconnect between research and science and actually making things happen and getting the word out. So I really appreciate sort of hearing you say that.
Yeah. So as we could go into more details as well, but maybe we could. But I thank you very much, Lindsay, for your
Anders,
for the work that you do. And applause.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lindsay, and thank you for being brave also as well to do this challenge.
Thanks, Lindsay. Anders, do we have time for one more?
Yes, maybe one more. If they
Rosa,
are as quick as Lindsay for
if
40
they're as
seconds.
quick as Lindsay. Rosa volunteered. Rosa, are you there? And are you as quick as Lindsay? Let's see if Rosa, otherwise we have
Lo voy a hacer en
Defeat.
español.
There we go. Thank you. Go ahead, Rosa.
Yes, I'm going to say it in Spanish.
I can't, there you are. Now I see you. Yes, Spanish is fine. The translation function is working fine. So whenever you're ready.
Okay. So the importance of having to use save water in a world where water is scarce. In Guatemala, in the rural area, there are over 2 million people who do not have water in their households. And in the community of Santa Cruz, there's a family, specifically a woman who's called Felicia. She's an indigenous woman who for a year has been having to carry water to bring to her household. And she has to walk several kilometers, and it takes her a very long time for her to do it. They boil the water because otherwise they may have some GI or gastrointestinal diseases. And we need to help those communities like Felicia's to get water because they can invest their time better in in the education of their children, taking care of them, their economy, and having more time for them to spend with their kids. We would do this by benefiting over 200 families in the community of Sivaca by building tanks for water from the rain and wells. And with this, we would be able to close gaps that have prevailed for years, and we would be able to comply with the SDG goal, benefiting a lot of families.
Okay, thank you. That's 1 minute, 20 seconds. Thank you very much, Rosa. So I will give you some quick feedback here because we might have time for 1 or 2 questions afterwards as well. I would suggest going straight to the example of Felicia. With you had sort of a preamble of right before you talked about Felicia. Start talking about her, then you can add the preamble after that story. And then I sensed that you I could sense that you sort of engaged where you talked about what would be possible if we could help them. So they would be able to educate their children. I would dwell on that, paint that beautiful picture of how these societies would look if they could have proper access to water. Paint that image in our minds. And then you hit us with, this is not possible right now. And then you tell us what you need to in order to help them. That's some really, really quick feedback, Rosa. But otherwise, I think you did. I think you did great. You had chosen well for what to include in your little pitch. A round of applause for you, Rosa. Do you have any question for me?
Yes. Actually, it's like we always have a story to tell.
Yes.
And we want to say a lot of things because we know that they have a lot of issues. And I know that we already have a solution. And I know how to help them, but it's more a matter of how to impact donors for them to know that this is a latent need and that we can close the gap, but that we need their help to do so.
Mm. Yeah, for them, I think it's about engaging the donors emotionally to tell them about the future they can contribute to with giving a donation. So if we paint a picture of how this could help and impact many people, and also raise the stakes about what will happen if we're not helping them, then I think when you ask for the donation, that will seem very small to the donor in order to who you can help. And and perhaps also show us examples of how you are helping. Perfect. Thank you very much, Rosa. Thank you. Sorry for being a bit short, but in order to respect everyone's time, but really good work.
Thanks again, Anders, for making this fantastically interactive session today. It's been great. I had a lot of fun. Thanks to all of you who volunteered, for those of you who listened and learned a lot. Great job, everyone. I will see you again Tuesday next week. And then we are going to talk about the SNH in WASH, and we're going to talk about the importance of water provision management in conflict and crisis. Anders mentioned the structure of storytelling, and we will have later on in the series of workshops, we will have a course on just that. It's going to happen on June 27th, when we're going to talk about storytelling and structuring the stories that we have to tell. So, thank you, Cecile. Thank you to Grundfos. Thanks to you. And thanks to the interpreters. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And I will see you on Tuesday. Thank you.